Quite a bower. You're sure you're not going to use it? You're sure you're not coming back, Nelly?'
'No,' replied the child, hurrying away with the few articles of dress she had come to remove. 'Never again. Never again.'
'She's very sensitive,' said Quilp, looking after her. 'Very sensitive. That's a pity. The bedstead is much about my size. I think I shall make it my little room.'
Mr Brass, encouraging this idea, as he would have encouraged any other emanating from the same source, the dwarf walked in to try the effect. This he did by throwing himself on his back upon the bed, with his pipe in his mouth, and then kicking up his legs and smoking violently. Mr Brass applauding this picture very much, and the bed being soft and comfortable, Mr Quilp determined to use it both as a sleeping place by night and as a kind of divan by day, and in order that it might be converted to the latter purpose at once, remained where he was and smoked his pipe out. The legal gentleman being by this time rather giddy and perplexed in his ideas, for this was one of the operations of the tobacco on his nervous system, took the opportunity of slinking away into the open air, where, in course of time, he recovered sufficiently to return with a countenance of tolerable composure. He was soon led on by the malicious dwarf to smoke himself into a relapse, and in that state stumbled upon a settee, where he slept till morning. Such were Mr Quilp's first proceedings on entering upon his new property. He was for some days restrained by business from performing any particular pranks, as his time was pretty well occupied between taking, with the assistance of Mr Brass, a minute inventory of all the goods in the place, and going abroad upon his other concerns, which happily engaged him for several hours at a time. His avarice and caution being now thoroughly awakened, however, he was never absent from the house one night, and his eagerness for some termination, good or bad, to the old man's disorder, increasing rapidly as the time passed by, soon began to vent itself in open murmurs and exclamations of impatience. Nell shrank timidly from all the dwarf's advances towards conversation, and fled from the very sound of his voice, nor were the lawyer's smiles less terrible to her than Quilp's grimaces. She lived in such continual dread and apprehension of meeting one or other of them on the stairs or in the passages if she stirred from her grandfather's chamber, that she seldom left it, for a moment, until late at night, when the silence encouraged her to venture forth and breathe the purer air of some empty room. One night she had stolen to her usual window, and was sitting there very sorrowfully, for the old man had been worse that day, when she thought she heard her name pronounced by a voice in the street. Looking down, she recognized Kit, whose endeavours to attract her attention had roused her from her sad reflections. 'Miss Nell,' said the boy in a low voice. 'Yes,' replied the child, doubtful whether she ought to hold any communication with the supposed culprit, but inclining to her old favourite still. 'What do you want?' 'I have wanted to say a word to you for a long time,' the boy replied, 'but the people below have driven me away and wouldn't let me see you. You don't believe, I hope you don't really believe, that I deserve to be cast off as I have been, do you, miss?' 'I must believe it,' returned the child, 'or why would grandfather have been so angry with you?' 'I don't know,' replied Kit. 'I'm sure I never deserved it from him, no, nor from you. I can say that with a true and honest heart, anyway. And then to be driven from the door when they only came to ask how old master was.' 'They never told me that,' said the child. 'I didn't know it, indeed. I wouldn't have had them do it for the world.' 'Thank ye, miss,' returned Kit. 'It's comfortable to hear you say that. I said I never would believe that it was your doing.' 'That was right,' said the child eagerly. 'Miss Nell,' cried the boy, coming under the window and speaking in a lower tone,
There are new masters downstairs. It's a change for you."
"It is indeed," replied the child.
"And so it will be for him when he gets better,"
said the boy, pointing towards the sick room.
"if he ever does,"
added the child, unable to restrain her tears.
"Oh, he'll do that, he'll do that," said Kit. "I'm sure he will. You mustn't be cast down, Miss Nell. Now, don't be, pray."
These words of encouragement and consolation were few and roughly said, but they affected the child and made her, for the moment, weep the more.
"He'll be sure to get better now," said the boy anxiously, "if you don't give way to low spirits and turn ill yourself, which would make him worse and throw him back just as he was recovering. When he does, say a good word, say a kind word for me, Miss Nell." "They tell me I must not even mention your name to him for a long, long time," rejoined the child. "I dare not. And even if I might, what good would a kind word do you, Kit? We shall be very poor. We shall scarcely have bread to eat." "It's not that I may be taken back," said the boy, "that I ask the favour of you. It isn't for the sake of food and wages that I've been waiting about so long in hopes to see you. Don't think that I'd come in a time of trouble to talk of such things as them."
The child looked gratefully and kindly at him, but waited that he might speak again.
"No, it's not that," said Kit, hesitating. "It's something very different from that. I haven't got much sense, I know, but if he could be brought to believe that I'd been a faithful servant to him, doing the best I could and never meaning harm, perhaps he mightn't—"
Here Kit faltered so long that the child entreated him to speak out, and quickly, for it was very late and time to shut the window.
"Perhaps he mightn't think it over venturesome of me to say, well then, to say this," cried Kit with sudden boldness. "This home is gone from you and him. Mother and I have got a poor one, but that's better than this with all these people here. And why not come there till he's had time to look about and find a better?"
The child did not speak. Kit, in the relief of having made his proposition, found his tongue loosened, and spoke out in its favour with his utmost eloquence.
"You think," said the boy, "that it's very small and inconvenient. So it is, but it's very clean. Perhaps you think it would be noisy, but there's not a quieter court than ours in all the town. Don't be afraid of the children. The baby hardly ever cries, and the other one is very good. Besides, I'd mind 'em. They wouldn't vex you much, I'm sure. Do try, Miss Nell, do try. The little front room upstairs is very pleasant. You can see a piece of the church clock through the chimneys, and almost tell the time. Mother says it would be just the thing for you, and so it would, and you'd have her to wait upon you both, and me to run of errands. We don't mean money, bless you. You're not to think of that. Will you try him, Miss Nell? Only say you'll try him. Do try to make old master come, and ask him first what I have done. Will you only promise that, Miss Nell?"
Before the child could reply to this earnest solicitation, the street door opened, and Mr Brass, thrusting out his night-capped head, called in a surly voice, "Who's there?" Kit immediately glided away, and Nell, closing the window softly, drew back into the room. Before Mr Brass had repeated his inquiry many times, Mr Quilp, also embellished with a nightcap, emerged from the same door, and looked carefully up and down the street, and up at all the windows of the house from the opposite side. Finding that there was nobody in sight, he presently returned into the house with his legal friend, protesting, as the child heard from the staircase, that there was a league and plot against him, that he was in danger of being robbed and plundered by a band of conspirators who prowled about the house at all seasons, and that he would delay no longer but take immediate steps for disposing of the property, and returning to his own peaceful roof,